And now, without any further ado, I would like to reintroduce Ken D.
You're going to get upstage. Oh, thank you. God bless you. Okay. Hi, I'm Ken. I'm an alcoholic. So how are you guys doing so far? Good. You wouldn't believe this, but I got a perfect bill of health from a doctor about 6 months ago. I had to go for a physical, and it was the first time I was to a doctor in 25 years. And everything was great. And he said, "Do you have any concerns?" And I said, "Just one." He said, "What's that?" I said, "The hereafter." And he said, "Oh, you're concerned about dying." I said, no, that's not it at all. I said, I go from the living room to the bedroom, and I say, what the hell am I here after? His deal was that you better get used to that kind of stuff. And I'm really glad to be here. I really am. I'm a big fan of AAs, and I'm a big fan of God's, and the two of them seem to be synonymous. And so I want to thank Dick and Janine and the folks on the committee who got me here, and I certainly want to thank my special host here, Lois and George, for being so the last few days. I really appreciate it. As well as all the other folks who came forward, Dr. Steve and all the gang. I felt like I was on some daytime serial, I don't know how to be a patient, because that's not my deal. I don't entertain sickness, because I notice every time I'm sick, I just don't feel well. And so it's not my deal. See this character over here, Glenn? Keep an eye on him. All the time. I hadn't seen him in 10 years, and he comes up to me and he goes, "You know who I am?" And I knew him, but I didn't know him. See that hereafter stuff. And he said, "You stayed at my house in Long Island." And as soon as he said that, then it was like, it kind of gives me an in. I know you got to like give me a little bit more light so I can see the room, And then I go, oh, yeah. And then I knew what it was about a little bit. And I had stayed at his house 10 years ago. And it was in Long Island. You don't expect to see a guy from Long Island taping in Kona, Okay. Well, I'm really happy to be here. I have a granddaughter, and through her eyes, I get to see a lot of things that I never saw before. Because as a kid, we didn't have time for a lot of the stuff that I have time to do now with her as a grandfather. And she's a big fan of The Wizard of Oz. And we had watched The Wizard of Oz, and there's a great scene at the end of The Wizard of Oz. And they're in the Emerald City, and they're trying to get an appointment to see the wizard. And in the process of doing that, the wizard really isn't a wizard. He's a phony. And so what he does is he's behind this curtain, and he's making a lot of noise, and I'm the wizard, and he's just a phony, just a flat-out phony. And the dog Toto goes over and pulls the curtain back and exposes this phony. And Judy Garland looks at him, and she says, "You're a very bad man." And he looks at her and he says, "No, my dear, I am not a very bad man. I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard," And that's the story, I think, of alcoholics. We're just not what we think we are. And the bottom line is, and then when people tell us, you're this, sometimes we buy into it, but we know at some level that's not really who we are. And this is an amazing trip for me, this whole deal. Everything I do now relates to AA. Have you reached that point in life where everything intermingles? I rented a car, and it had this GPS, global positioning system. And when you get into it, left my coat off. I hope it's okay with you folks, because I think I broke my water. My fever has broken. But I got into this car and I punched in where I wanted to go, and I started down the street, and anyway, the car had been out in the snow the night before because I'd had it for a few days, so I took it in to get it washed. And as I did that, I had to turn off the direction I was going, and then when I came out, I had to go in the opposite direction to get back on the road where I was. And as soon as I started going the opposite direction, this voice came on and said, "Please follow directions." And I thought, shit, if I had had this earlier in life, this is fantastic. Why didn't I have this earlier? The first time you, boom, start to go in the wrong direction, a voice just booms at you, and says, "Please follow directions," And somebody else said it today, but I needed a sponsor in kindergarten, I really did. I needed somebody I could call and kind of tell them where I was at and have them say, "Ken, eat the cookies, take the nap," And I would have been okay, I just would have been okay. But I didn't have that, I grew up in Brooklyn in the 40s and the 50s, and it was a great place for a kid. It was a great place. The area I lived in was a great place for a kid. We played stickball. We played box ball. We had a hoop under a light, and we shot hoops. And during the summer, ice cream truck would come around, and in the wintertime, we had winter sport. And we went to parochial school where everybody was in the same deal, Everybody was in the... I went there when I had to wear knickers, so that gives you an idea when I was going. And you didn't get to wear long pants until the 8th grade. That's when you're big time. I didn't make it past the 4th grade in parochial school. But the deal is that the nice part about our neighborhood was that you knew something was special about it. And what was special about it is that we were not subject to local, state, or federal authority. It was the mafia. We answered to nobody in my neighborhood. It was like there was absolutely no crime. People used to say, "City's getting bad." What city are they talking about? We used to leave our skates in front of the house and our bikes on the sidewalk and go in, and they'd be there the next morning. Nobody took anything in my neighborhood. And I heard last night when we were listening to the speaker, he was referring to drugs, that he got into drugs. Sean said he got into drugs. And I never took a drug. I never smoked a marijuana cigarette. I never took a prescription drug. In my group, they call me an alcothorus. I never took a drug of any kind. And there's a really good reason for that. Because part of our neighborhood, we had rules. We weren't subject to their rules, but we had our rules. And our rules were, if you sold or used drugs in the neighborhood, the first time you did that, they'd open a car door and close it on your hand. And then the second time, we always figured you moved to Jersey. So where's Vinny? I think he moved to Jersey. You know what I mean? We got an address, don't bother, Don't bother, And we just never saw you again. It was just that simple. And it was an unbelievable place to grow up. And how we ended up there, I don't know. We were an Irish Catholic family in an all-Italian neighborhood. My dad died when I was young. My mom was raising 7 kids. And it was an amazing thing. I was the youngest of them. And she used to say, the only time you kids say no to a drink is if you misunderstood the question. Like my mom didn't drink. My dad died from it when he was young. And my mom just all around us was like a sea of booze. And my uncles would stop by on Sunday and they'd say, pour me a little one. Now, give me a wee fella. Give me a wee fella, Ken. And then say, and you know what? You better give him a partner, you know? And so I knew all this stuff about drinking, and then I had this deal. It was like, you know, the world of, in the Hindu and stuff, they talk about the world of duality, you know, and I had this duality in my life. I would go to parochial school. I had to go 6:15 Mass every day. And the nun would hit this clicker. She'd go, click, click, and 700 kids would hit the floor at the same time. And then she'd go, click, click, and we'd all go into our rows. And the deal was she had command. These nuns had command of an entire school with a clicker. They didn't have to say anything anymore. Just click, click, down. And then we left that school, and we did whatever the hell we wanted, you know? So it was like, in there, subject to this. Out here, hey, we don't play by those rules. We just want you to get a good education, you know? And the deal was is that I had a house where something was always going on, and it was always phrased in nothing. So how come you're bleeding in the glasses out of the front window? Nothing. Don't worry about it. You know, nothing. And everything was couched in nothing. And so I grew up thinking that nothing meant something. But I never knew what it was. And what that something was active alcoholism all around us. That's what it was. It was everywhere. And the nice part about my drinking career is you're not going to hear a big drunkalogue from me because I don't have one. I really don't have one. Because I don't remember most of it. And the stuff I remember most vividly never happened. So it doesn't leave you much to tell, you know. I love people who say, well, when I was 4... I'm impressed, you know. And the deal is I like alcoholics because I'm an alcoholic who, they were talking tonight, like, I always learn stuff when I come to these meetings. I didn't know there was an oh-no fish. So I've got to tell the guys when I get home. And I go to a group that's not real bright, you know. We count our sobriety like this. You know. Most of the guys thought Moby Dick was a venereal disease. You know, like they didn't know. They have no idea. They don't have a clue. You know. That's the way they are. You say there's a dead bird, they look up. That's the way. You know, that's the way we are. You know. I took a guy to get some bowling trophies, and he goes, "Wow, is this guy good?" No, Donnie, he makes these. Yeah, sure, I know that. Yeah. You know. But those are the guys you hang out with. You know, we're all totally unscarred by education. It never landed a blow, you know. Wherever it was going on, we were over here, you know. We were absent. And the nice part about hanging out with guys like that is, you know, it's just amazing. You hear stuff sometimes and you just kind of look. You know, it's like, a guy said a couple of weeks ago, you know, Ricky, you know, there's a good chance that if your mother didn't have any children, you won't have any either. And you've got to think sometimes, you know, my life is tied up in this. You know, my life is, you know, this is my lifeline, you know. And the deal is that I love to come to these things because I love to hear people laugh. I really do. Because I know a couple of things about laughter that most people don't know. The first one is you cannot laugh and think at the same time. So every time you laugh, you're getting a respite from your favorite topic, which is you know. And the second is that, you know, your body produces endorphins when you laugh. It produces a lot of endorphins, which is very, very healthy for you. It's very, very healthy. And they list laughing now right up there with sex for producing endorphins. So guys at my age, we have a distinct advantage because we bring laughter in sex by just getting undressed, you know, like. You know? So those things are a pumping and a pumping, you know, and the deal is that I know if you're an alcoholic of my type that, you know, your oars aren't in the water all the time, you know. You look at the newcomers and sometimes, and not the ones that are here because they're exceptions, but they, you know, it looks like the hamster's dead, but the wheel is still turning, you know. It has a little life to it, you know. You know. And it's all a disease of perception. You hear that over and over again. It's not about what is really going on, it's what you think is going on. You know? It's like the 2 5-year-old boys are in the hospital, and the one 5-year-old boy says to the other 5-year-old boy, he says, "I'm in here to have my appendix out." He says, "What are you in here for?" And the second one says, "I'm in here to be circumcised." And the first one says, "Uh-oh." He said, "They did that to me when I was first born, and I didn't walk for a year." You know, like, So, So the deal is that, you know, that's what's going on. But I was very, very lucky when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous because I went to my meeting. My first meeting was July 5th of 1970, and I walked in and I met a guy. And he said to me, you know, "I'm going to be your temporary sponsor." And through a very, very loving God, he is still my temporary sponsor. You know, I don't know if it's going to work, you know. But he seems to need the job, you know. And but most people don't get a chance to have that kind of connection with the same person over that period of time. And he and I talk on the phone, and he's still back in the East Coast. And we were in Jekyll Island last year at a convention, or I was, and Clancy was there. And I don't think there's a convention that Clancy's missed, really. I don't think there is. And that was the very first conference that my sponsor had ever been to. First convention. And he was 37 years sober. And he and Clancy were the same age, not sobriety-wise. And they got talking a little bit. And he got into it. He said, "Wow, this is great. I never knew this is what it was. I didn't know what you did in these things." And it reminded me that back in New York, where, you know, Laura and them, they usually don't have these things. They have the Bill Wilson dinner, you know, and that's about it, you know. You don't hear people saying, "Well, I think I'll go to the Bronx Fall Festival." You know, "I'm going to go to the Brooklyn Fling," you know. You can't get people to go from one borough to another, you know. They don't want to go make it back, you know, like. And the deal is that I just took it for granted that he knew all this stuff, and he just didn't. And we had talked about it for a long time, but he was my sponsor, and one of the things he did early on, which I always will treasure him for, was he got me involved. And the way he got me involved was not by telling me a lot of stuff. And almost all the speakers who I've heard, and I've heard all of them, said the same thing, and that is their sponsors got them involved in action, and in one way or another. Or Lorna said, get them in love with the program. And the bottom line of that is that what he did to me, he said, "If you want what I have, then you're going to have to do what I do. Now, you can come along with me and do that if you want. And if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. But then don't be calling me saying you want what I have." So I started doing what he was doing. Now, you know, your little theme here is carrying the message. You know, I have a wide range of stories on carrying the message. The first one I had was my sponsor invited me. I was separated from my family. They had moved out of state, and I wasn't able to see my kids, and it was a really, really tough time when I first got here. I had been living with my mom in a senior citizen place. I was indicted. I was going to go to jail again. It just didn't seem like I was on a winning streak. And it seemed like the whole world was a tuxedo and I was a pair of brown shoes. It just didn't seem like I fit in anywhere, And so the bottom line is that he said to me, come on over to my house. And he'd find various excuses to get me over the house. And the meetings at that time were always at 9 o'clock. And so basically he'd get me into his house and he'd say, well, you're here now, you might as well eat. And he'd give me dinner and then boom, I'd be off. And I would think I'd be off. But he'd take me then to a meeting. And so I was connected. And the first time he ever asked me to do anything was on a 12-step call. And in the city, they didn't call them 12-step calls because of the neighborhood we lived in. They'd say, go put the hit on this guy. This guy, we're going to go put the hit on this guy. So he called me and said, we got to go put the hit on this guy. And I said, okay. So I'm in the car, and I know we're going to go put the hit on this guy. And when we got there, we couldn't park the car. There was no parking. So he says, let me go around the block. You jump in and get him. So it seemed easy. And this is a guy who never asked me to do anything. So I jump out of the car. I thought, wow, 12-step, hit, dude, take a guy. So I went to the door, and this woman came to the door in this brownstone, and she said that she had made the call, because she asked, who are you? And I said, I'm a guy from AA. And she said, oh, I made the call for my husband, and he changed his mind. Oh. And just then, I heard this tremendously loud voice, of a drunk. You get the hell off the stoop! And as my sponsor tells the story, when he came around the block, I had yanked that guy outside the door, and I was beating him with a garbage can lid. And I had that guy, and I'm smacking him with this garbage can lid, and, he's like blinking. And he whistled me like I was a retriever. And he was some bitch and mother. And so, because he never asked me to do anything. And here I was going to fail first time out. If I'm failing, somebody's paying for it, So I get back in the car, and we drive away, and we go a couple of blocks. You know how when you had a little moment of interest, and your breath is kind of like... And he says, I want you to do me 2 favors. I said, what's that? He said, the first is, don't ever consider that a 12-step call. He said, and the second is, don't tell anybody I'm your sponsor for a while. And, that just came and went out of my head. And the other night I was at a meeting, and they were talking about 12-step calls, and that was the whole focus of the meeting. And I was sitting there while different people were sharing, and I'm thinking to myself, somewhere, there could be a guy who's drunk out of his mind, and someone says to him, why don't you try AA? And he's gashed from here to here, and I called him once. It just didn't work for me, That's what I figured. And that's kind of the way it was. Now, last week, I made a 12-step call on a guy down on the corner, downtown San Diego, and the guy was on F Street. And I pull up with another guy, and there's a guy there has a bag. And I said, that's the guy right there. So we go over, and it was the guy. But I thought there'd be a bottle in the bag. There was a cell phone. That's how he called us. He had ripped somebody off with a cell phone, put it in a bag so nobody would rip it off from him. And that's how he made his 12-step call. And I thought, God, the bottom in this program just keeps raising, It's just amazing to me what goes on here. Just amazing to me. And you know, when I got here right away, they got me involved in doing retreats and back in on the East Coast, they had a lot of these Matt Talbot retreats and different things. And you'd go on retreats right away. And the deal was to let you know that this is a spiritual program. And that inside of the word spiritual is the word ritual. And if you're going to be spiritual, you have to develop a ritual. It's something that has to be done. You don't get to where you need to go without engaging in an action that means you have to surrender where you're at. You have to continually surrender where you're at. You know, sometimes it sounds so easy when you say it. It's so difficult often in the doing. But surrender is a quantum leap from ego to egolessness. It's one step and the journey's over. But you can spend eternity almost getting ready for that step. People just don't want to take that step because they feel that when they take it, they'll cease to exist as who they are. And that's exactly what happens. You know? You cannot maintain who you are and become what you need to be. You have to let go of what you are. You know, it's amazing when in the 12 and 12 it says, if I keep turning my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him, I'll become like the hole in the donut. Watch my lips. You are the hole in the donut. That's the most important part. The hole has always been, it always will be, and it always remains the same. The donut will just come and go. The hole will be there forever. You know? You've got to be connected with what's going to be there. You know, we're here, 50, 100 years, and then what are you going to do with the rest of your time? You know, like, what are you going to do then? And I'm fortunate enough because there was a period of my life when I didn't have to work, and I got to volunteer in the hospice, and I got to work with people who were dying. And they have a whole different agenda than people who are living. They focus on what's important because they only have a little bit of time. And the one thing about dealing with those people is the fact that they just kind of are getting into a place where they know they don't know. And the reason that most people have a tremendous fear when they're dying is for the first time, they're being evicted from their hiding place. The props that they've made themselves are being taken away. And not only are they missing the props, they're missing all the attention they have to give them. So now the attention is focused solely on who they are, and they don't know who they are. And it's a very terrifying thing to be leaving for a place where you're not sure of the language, you don't have a passport, you don't know the currency, and you have no idea what comes next. And more importantly is you don't know who you're taking. You just don't know who you're taking. And that's what the steps do. The steps evict you from your hiding places. It allows you to die and still live. It allows you to go down and come up. It allows you to give it up and then get back what you need. You know, when people get here, you notice alcoholics never lose some things. They always share, I lost everything. And I used to say that too. I lost everything. And as I've been here longer, what I found out is the everything I lost has turned out to be nothing. And the nothing I was left with has turned out to be everything. And I couldn't have said that early on in my sobriety. In 1993, I had a son who was just a great, great kid, a terrific kid. And he was on a boat going around the world doing what he wanted to do. He was acting and dancing and having a great time. And he was living life to the max. And he had graduated from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. And I'd gone to his graduation, and Jeremy Irons gave the commencement speech. And there was I'm trying to think of this old actress that she started out as a kid, and she's 100 years old. And my mom knew her from the silent movie days. And she was there. And it was just a great thing because my mom was there, and we got to see him graduate in 1983. We didn't know that 10 years later he'd be dead. Just didn't know that. And I got a call that he was very, very sick, and they were sending him home to me. And they sent him home, and When his mom and I had divorced, the boys had stayed with me, and I got to raise them as a single parent, which was really a real great hoot for me. And the end result of that was when he got home, he had AIDS. And he landed in LAX in July 7th of '93, and by September 7th, 2 months later, he was dead. And he stayed with me for a while, and just all kinds of crazy things happened. I got to, his mom started to come over the house. I got to meet my husband-in-law. You know, like, you know, there are certain situations where all the rules change. You know, when it comes to your kids and people you love, you know, the thing I've loved about Alcoholics Anonymous is it taught me about things that I didn't even know I didn't know anything about. And love is the big one. Well, I'll tell you, love is going to any lengths. And love is a very, very different thing. I go to meetings sometimes and people talk about relationships. I don't want relationships. They're so damn shallow. I don't want no relationship. But love is something else. It's just something else. And the bottom line is when you love somebody, you're just willing to go all out. You know, you don't even notice you're going all out. You just do it because that's who you are and that's what you want to do. And I got to see people in AA. They started coming around, and there's a story in AA about the footprints in the sand, and sometimes you see a few, you know, you see a lot, and then you just see one, and it's supposed to be that's when God's carrying you. That's not my story. My story is there was always a lot of footprints. People just kept showing up. Guys would come over my house, and they would try to help me. And my son one night was, he had a great sense of humor during this whole thing. And one night he was just running a fever at night and then getting cold. And then this fever kicked in and we couldn't get it down. And we were packing him in ice and rubbing him in alcohol. And his mom came and finally about 3:34 in the morning, he opened his eyes and he saw his mom and his brother and I there. And he says, wow. He says, this fever is really something. He says, I'm having a view of a full family. And, you know, he says, it looks so nuclear. You know? And I got to see things that you just don't expect to see as a parent. You know, he had reached the point where he wanted to maintain his dignity, so he wanted to continue to use the toilet facilities. And so I would put comforters and pillows on the floor, and I would watch as my son crawled across the floor trying to go to the bathroom. And he would fall asleep on the floor because he just ran out of energy. And it hit me one day as I was doing this. I said, I crawled on the floor and I lost my dignity. And here's my son crawling on the floor to maintain his dignity. So this whole thing is perception. It's not what you're doing, it's what leads you to do what you're doing. And you get to see that life here is really, really exciting. I mean, you know, these kind of things kind of bring it out. You know, you guys work all year to get to this, and this is a lot of fun. And you find out in Alcoholics Anonymous that it's all about having good laughs, a lot of yucks, but at the same time realizing that right below the level of all of that, there's a very dead-on seriousness of what goes on, because people's lives are at stake, and our own lives are at stake. You know, there isn't a place you can go to, and there isn't a person you can sit next to where you can't hear a story where somebody's life is in jeopardy right now. But all our lives are in jeopardy. Every single one of us. We all know that we have a certain runway, but nobody knows when it's going to be. And so the idea is to get on with the things you need to do, and that's why I love Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not only added life to my years, years to my life, but life to my years. I'm well past my shelf life. You know, like, you know, I mean, I've been thrown out of cars. I remember one time I was thrown out of a poker game because they just tired of me. And I was thrown 2 floors, and I landed on a landing without, you know, like, and there was a cat on the step. And the cat looked at me like, as if to say, wow, nice landing, you know, like, and I kind of checked him out, you know, like, yeah, you know, keep your eye on me, you know, and that's just the way it's been in my life. It's like I have always been in a scenario in my life where a lot of times I didn't know what scenario I was in. You know, if you're an alcoholic of my type, you're trying to escape from a reality you're not in. You know? And most of the stuff I see people do is like housekeeping in a dream. You know, it's a lot of activity, but it doesn't accomplish anything. And the idea here is you get a chance to do some really, really great things. You get a chance to work with newcomers. You get a chance to be with old-timers. You get a chance just to live life. And you get a chance to grow spiritually. And that's the part that I like the best, because what I found out, I didn't know at the time, but the lesson for me was pretty simple. I had to learn to love, and I had to learn to come to the realization that there's absolutely no power here. And I know both of those things today. I know how to love, and I know there's absolutely no power here. You know, it's a case of there's one who has all power, and that one is God. May you find him now. You know, there was only this now, and that was the other thing. You know, it always seemed like I was living my life in the past or in the future, and I sponsor a psychiatrist now. He's a very sick guy, and he just hates it that these guys that go have like the keys to the hall to set up the meeting, and he has to wait for them, you know, like. And he said, they tell me the same things every week, and I put the chairs here, and then make the coffee this way. I said, 'cause you don't listen, you know. You know, you think you're having a tough time with them? I get calls from them all the time, you know. They say, I thought he was supposed to be a wise guy, you know. I thought he had some smarts. You know, every time we make the coffee, we got to tell them the same things, you know, like, and the deal is that each of us comes at this from our own deal. You know, sometimes you can be so smart, you can miss this thing. And the reason you miss it is because you're looking for something that isn't there, you know. And the mind is a great thing, you know. We all have these great minds, and our minds are synonymous with resistance. And that's why surrender is such a great thing, because as soon as you surrender, it does away with the mind. There's no resistance. And when you hear people say, I have the weight of the world off my shoulder, you do, because you're surrendering. And surrendering is just a matter of letting it go, you know, turning it over. And you don't have to stop doing anything. Surrender is an inner phenomenon. You can still work on the outside and see if you can change it. You're just not working on it on the inside. You've given that up. And you get to go and see folks do all kinds of stuff. You know, I love to watch alcoholics because we have a way of getting some information and then totally misapplying it. You know? And thinking we're doing okay. You know, like really thinking we're doing okay. And I'm reminded of the Catholic guy who's walking across the street and he gets hit by a bus. And as he's dying, the policeman holding him in his arms is yelling out, is there a priest in the crowd? Anybody know a priest nearby? And no priest. And finally this alcoholic comes forward and he says, I'm not a priest, but I've lived in back of the church all my life and I know all the prayers. He says, well, you know, this guy is dying, you know. He's going to need some help. Might as well be you. So the alcoholic gets down on one knee and gets real close to the dying guy. And he gets up close to his ear, and he goes, B8. You know? I18, you know? So he had some information. He just didn't really know how to quite apply it, you know, like, that's the deal. And the deal is that sometimes you see the beginning of a story, and if you don't stick around for a long time, you don't see the middle and the end of that story. You just see the beginning of it. And Glenn asked me about this one guy, and he asked me to mention it tonight. And that is, when I was working in the hospice, there was a guy, Stanley. And I don't know how this happened, because I decided I was going to do something where I was going to go and do something in addition to AA. I decided that I was tired of hanging out with drunks. I didn't mind them, but you know, I was really getting overwhelmed after a while. And I was 13 years sober, so it was time to obviously grow. But I tell you, sometimes I'm so stupid, I amaze myself. And so I got in this hospice thing. And the very first guy they send me to work with is an angry 72-year-old guy. He has lung cancer, and if you're in the hospice, they only take you if your diagnosis is 6 months or less. But, doctors are wrong most of the time. It's not by accident, and I hope Dr. Steve is here, but it's not by accident the word practice thing, is in the front of their name. Practicing, But anyway, I went to see this guy, and I said, you seem terribly angry. What's the deal? And he said, well, the deal with me is he said, you wouldn't understand. And I said, what do you mean I wouldn't understand? He said, you just wouldn't understand. I said, why don't you give me a shot? He said, I'm 39 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, and I should have gotten a 39-year cake in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I'm too weak to go to the meetings. And I said, no kidding. Public level. I said, no kidding. And I said, I'm 13 years sober, Stanley. He said, no kidding. And I said, yeah. And he said, I didn't know that. I said, I didn't know. So we started talking. I said, look, I'm going to take you to a noontime meeting, and we'll give you that cake. So I got him loaded up with morphine and took him to that noontime meeting, and we gave him a 39-year cake. Well, Stanley kind of defied the doctors a little bit, and he lived another whole year. And I got to give him a 40-year cake. And in the meantime, guys would call me, these weepers and whiners. Ken, she's leaving me, Ken, I can't find a job, And so I said, come on over, but I got to go down and see this guy. He's, I got a commitment in this guy. We got to go see him. So I brought this guy, Fred, who's a Hell's Angel guy. So I take him into the room, and by this time, Stanley's had a colostomy. He's got IVs going everywhere. He's on oxygen. And I said, Stanley. I said, this is Fred. I said, he's trying to get sober, but he's just not having a good time in AA. And so Stanley whipped that oxygen mask off. And he goes, wow, sober in AA. What a beautiful day. We're so lucky. God's in our life. This is so beautiful. La la. You should be happy, Fred. I'm happy. The world is great. Everything in my life is perfect. And that's only because I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so he went on like that for about 4 or 5 minutes until the oxygen ran out. And then we got outside. I said to Fred, now, tell me about your problems, And the deal is, it tells us on page 132 and 133 of the big book, it says, we're not a glum lot. And God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. Those are the 3 key things, happy, joyous, and free. I don't know why people say I don't know what God's will is for me. It's right there on page 133. If you've never heard it before, it's on page 133. Happy, joyous, and free. And then it says, we make our own misery. God doesn't make it. We make it. We think we got problems, and therefore that calls for the mind to get in there and do something. The mind wouldn't really have a whole lot to do if we just surrendered to the moment. If you start surrendering to each moment and realizing that God's in charge, there's absolutely no problems in the now. Did you ever notice that? Well, you're sitting here right now, there's not one problem. That's because this is where God hangs out. He hangs out in the now. And we tell you that in the big book. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him Thursday. At some point, you have to realize that the person that you brought to Alcoholics Anonymous could not stay sober. So it should become quite obvious that something has to happen to that person. That person has to die. That entity, that mechanical thing that brought you here, was not able to stay sober. So that thing has to be jettisoned, has to be gotten rid of. And you have to become conscious, which means you wake up. I mean, I'm always amazed when you say to them, you have to become conscious, and they say, well, that sounds mystical. Well, let's read here in the third step, right before you get to the taking the prayer. It says, as we become conscious of his presence, we will lose our fear of today, tomorrow, and the hereafter. We will be reborn. Conscious. In 10, it says, to some extent, we have become God conscious. In step 11, we want to maintain a what? A conscious contact. Burn into the consciousness of this bozo, that he can stay sober. Like the thing here is you have to wake up. And in order to wake up, you have to wake up. I mean, did you get that? Yeah? You'd be surprised. A lot of people just hear that and go, uh-huh. Yeah. And the deal is, now that you're awake, be awake, stay awake. And the fact is that, I look in the book and, I say, gosh, some of the words they use to describe us could really make you a little down as a person. I mean, you read the doctor's opinion. He says, we're mental defectives and maladjusted to life and, delusional, children of chaos, producers of confusion, outright mental defectives, And within that context, you got to say, hey, there's me, I'm as happy as can be, And then you have to say to yourself, okay, that's the way it is, but that isn't the way it has to be. So then you start on the process. You start on the process of taking the steps. And as you go through the steps, what you find out is that person has to go. That person just can't stay. And the person who emerges is your true being. The trouble with most of the guys I work with is they think their mind is them. They haven't reached the point yet where they don't understand that their mind is just pretending to be them. Have you ever been in a meeting and you heard somebody say, well, my mind waits on the edge of the bed. And when I get up in the morning, it says, good morning. I got a plan for you all day. Or somebody says, in my head, there's a committee. There's 8 people talking, and I don't know which one is the leader. And if you find yourself saying those things, then it's not your mind. You're its body, You wouldn't take that crap from your hand. You know why? It's your hand. Your hand doesn't say, I'm going to go get a soda. Hey, I'll tell you what. I'll make that decision. Stay right there on the couch. But that's the deal. And people, that's why when, it's like this, it's like thinking and thinking and thinking and, and that's on the walls. It used to say, think, think, think. And then the idea was after you thought 3 times about it, you were supposed to take a 3rd step on it. Some people thought that was like an infinity thing. Think, think. They didn't have enough room, so it's think, 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 And thinking is what you do when you don't want to take action. It's a great way of saying you're doing something when you're doing absolutely nothing. If you really want to lose weight, start thinking about eating. Don't eat, just think about it, And the deal is, I have a lot of guys, they get ticked off because I tell them, remember, no pain, no gain. And they look at you and they go, okay. And then they get going and then you see that they're not doing anything. You say, hey, you're doing the flip side of it. You're doing no gain, no pain. And the bottom line is that you watch people and you realize that the kids know everything. The kids just know everything. And the reason they know everything is because they're totally in the moment. They haven't gotten that confused yet where they're out of the moment. If it wasn't for man, there'd be no time. I mean, I get on a plane and I set my watch ahead. I set it back. Depends which way I'm going. I set it this way. I set it that way. Why? Why? Wherever I get, it's going to be now. Why the hell do I have to set my watch? It doesn't make any sense to me. If animals could talk and an elephant bumped into a giraffe, he'd say, "Hey, what time is it?" Giraffe would snap around with his neck and go, "Now, of course." It's the deal where, we just don't understand a lot of this stuff. And we don't understand it because we spend most of our life being delusional. And I don't have anything against the word denial, but I love the word delusion. I looked those words up one time, and denial just says, denial. Someone who knows the truth, but just doesn't want to say it. Then you turn and you say, delusional. Our word, the big book word. It says, psychotic thought. Where the individual involved has no concept of reality. Delusional, Hell, if you're in denial, you've got spiritual growth. You've already grown a little bit. I'm just a liar now. Before I was an outright mental defective. Now I'm just your basic fibber, And the deal is that that's the way it is. And it's like we just play a game with ourselves, and the game is distraction. And the reason is because, and 2 or 3 of the people I heard over the weekend mentioned it, the idea is to be still. And being still for an alcoholic is a death-defying act because it means that you have to be still. You notice how some of this is so heavy. These are the guys who wrote the big book like that, this big book. You want to read something that's heavy, it's this big book. You go and you read about alcoholism. There's now libraries on alcoholism. And in this book it says, when the alcoholic drinks, something happens. Heavy. It's the sum total of what we know. So what happens if I'm an alcoholic and I drink? Something. And you get to realize that while you're here, there's if life was a marching band, alcoholics would be piano players. We would just yeah, give me that one, yeah, Regular people be looking for flutes and stuff, clarinet. Yeah, let me have a banjo or something, but we just don't know how to do this stuff. We're our minds are like, we're always trying to be where we're not, and we always are where we can't be. And that's why we're wondering what's going on. It's like, the fish know the ocean, but they can't see it. The ocean sees the fish, but don't know them. And that's the way it is here. What we see, we don't know. What we know, we don't see. And you say sometimes, I have this feeling, I have this moment of clarity. And then, boom, it gives you an insight. It says that in the big book. It says, we'll get glimpses of God's kingdom, and then we'll see our place in it. And we'll have a sense of ease about it. But those things will be fleeting because we'll get caught up all over again in what goes on here. This, for some reason, is important to us. I don't know why. Because after a while, you just realize you hang out here for a while, and then it's bye-bye. Like you're getting off the plane. Bye-bye. 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 You're gone, They say that there's a book about Carl Jung, and he was talking to Indian chiefs, and in that book, he said to the Indian chiefs, what can you tell me about the Anglos? And the Indian chief says, we don't understand them. He says, they're never satisfied where they're at. He said, they're always seeking. We don't know what they're seeking. We think they're mad, and that's the way it is. That's who we are. We're mad because we can't seem to be where we're at. And I was fortunate because this guy who got with me is a plumber. And he said, I go to meetings, and I read the big book, and I work with others, and I live a life. Now, which part of that don't you like? And I said, well, so far it seems like, the ingredients of something I can get into. And he had the first car. He had the first car, a 9-passenger station wagon. Do you remember when they came out with those in 1971? And it had a seat that looked out the back. It was the first time they've had a seat that looked out the back. And when I got in, he'd say, "Get in the back." I'd say, "Why?" He said, "I want you to see the wreckage of your past." You know? And he was that kind of a guy, you know. But he was a kind of a guy who knew what I needed, and what I needed was discipline. I had never had discipline in my life. I had done things, but I never had discipline, and I never had spiritual discipline. And in the 11th step, it talks about we need spiritual discipline. And being unscarred by education, I looked up that word discipline. It means to make life simple. When you're disciplined, life is simple because your choices are minimal. You know, Keith was in the Marine Corps. I'm sure they didn't say, "Keith, what would you like to do in boot camp?" You know, I'm sure they just gave you a deal, what you had to do. And I want guys, when guys come to my house, I have such nice guys that I sponsor. I have some Hell's Angel guys who they have terrible language, and they say a word. I won't repeat it here, but. He's one of those. And she. And so I said, you can't be saying that. You can't be saying that. So now we say they're roosters with pacifiers. So we found a way. We found a way to kind of like minimize that somewhat, you know, like, and the bottom line is that we realize we just have to go a little slower at some of this stuff. And then I have a priest who doesn't want to be a priest. And I have a psychiatrist who's just beyond all means, you know, like, you know, when he has a psychic change, I think it's going to have to be a polypsychic change, you know, like, because he's just lost, you know. And I have guys come to my house, and I sponsor a guy who's a Muslim. And the word Muslim means one who submits. And he was over at my house a couple of months ago, and during the football season, and he wanted to bring a pizza, and he had to do his night prayer. And some guy knocked at the door, and the guy said to me, "Somebody told me I should come talk to you about God. I'm a friend of Bill W.'s." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "I'm having trouble with God." I said, "Oh, okay." So I just, "Come on in." I said, "We're going to get ready to watch the game. There's going to be about 20 guys here in a while. You can stay and have pizza and watch it." "No, I know you do that on Monday night. I just wanted to get this out of the way." And I forgot to tell him Sam was in the other room. So he starts to talk for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden we hear, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa." And he says, "What in the hell is that?" And I said, "Oh, it's Sam doing his third step." You know, like, I haven't seen him since. I have another dream that he's in a bar somewhere saying, "I tried AA," and the guy's going, "I tried it. Did you call him first?" But it's just an amazing thing here. Just an amazing thing. And when I was asked to come down here, I was so looking forward to it because there were some people here that I hadn't seen in a while. And there were some people I had met at another convention who I knew were going to be here. They told me this was their big deal. And I was so looking forward to it. And when I got here and I was going through a little bit of not feeling well, I thought, this is great, that I can come and do things even when they're not under the most ideal conditions. Because there was a time where I couldn't do anything. You know, I don't know how many times I planned to go somewhere, but somehow I couldn't get the suction from my butt and the bar stool to separate, you know, like I'm thinking, going, digging, planning, pop, you know. And And I hung out with guys who, they knew a little bit about spiritual things from another perspective, you know. They just knew that there had to be a God. And I remember I was running numbers at one time, and it was one of those dopey things in life because my dad was dead, my mom needed some financial help, and she was working as hard as she could, and she couldn't just make it anymore. And so I went and I started running numbers, and I was failing math in school. The math teacher in school in the 50s was probably making about $4,000 a year. She made that. I think she made $3,000. I was making $125 a week running numbers. She was telling me math was my problem. I had some cash. I was going to say, you know, I don't think it's my problem, you know, but the deal was that I ran these numbers. And I went one day because I was getting this mixed thing about God, and I said to the guy, his name just happened to be Vinny. I said, Vinny, do you believe in God? And he says, why are you asking? I said, well, I have some questions. And you're the guy, because he was the guy I always went to when I wanted to know something real. The nuns were good for, like, you know, the Beatitudes and stuff, but that was it. And so he said, Ken, when we run numbers, do we ever lose? I said, no, we never lose. I said, sometimes guys win. Whoa, I didn't say guys win. I said, do we ever lose? And I said, no, we never lose. He said, you think God is going to make a game where he loses? What's the matter with you? You know? And I left there thinking, Vinny knows. Vinny just knows. You know, Vinny knew everything. Vinny knew who was going to die before the paper did. You know? Vinny had a way of predicting things, you know? People used to say Vinny was in pest control, but he knew a lot, you know? You know, he'd say things that, you know, like, hey, he fell asleep in the trunk of a car, he deserved to be shot, you know, like that. There was that kind of a, you know. And he was the guy who would always teach you about the right tool to use for the right job, you know, like Vinny would tell somebody who was thinking of going off in a certain direction, like, a .38 is not a good weapon for that type of venture. And the reason it's not a good weapon is because there's going to be multiple people at the place that you're going to. And you're going to have a lot of vocal skills and crowd control abilities. So a .38 is not your deal. Because, like, if you want to rob a bank, and there's 17, 20 people in that bank, you got to say, okay, get down, please get down, don't move, and you got to break them up, you got to do all this stuff. But if you go in and go, everybody seems to know what to do, you know, like they just start finding places to get down, you know, like, yeah. And so Vinny was a guy who had a lot of skills, you know. And as I gotten older in AA, I realized that's what God is. God is because there's nothing else to say. There's really nothing else to say, you know. If it's God's will to happen, it's going to happen. And if it's not his will to happen, it's not going to happen. And as I'm here longer, I realize my job is really, you know, I used to there for a while think I had to get off in the ether somewhere. And then I was reverted back to reading in the book, and on page 77 is where I focus now, where it says, you know, my real purpose here is to be a maximum service to God and to help to the people around me. That's it. It's just that simple. It's not how long I can sit in the lotus position. You know, it's not how long I can do this or that or something else. It's not just meditating. It's being meditative. It's being in a state of mind all the time, or a state of no mind, if you will, where you just know that this is going to work out. I have no clue. You know, people come up and say, how do you know it's going to work out? That's my experience. How do you know it's going to work out this way or that way? I know. I'm not telling you I know that. I'm just telling you I know how it's going to work out. It's going to be working out just the way it's supposed to work out. Can't work out any other way, actually. And with newcomers, they kind of like, they have a little twitch when you tell them that, you know, like it's like you just kick them real hard or something, you know, like. And the bottom line is, I just have that experience. I can tell you right now, you're going to have to find this out on your own. And some of you, I'm sure, already knew it ahead of me, is there's absolutely no power here. There's God's power and no other power. And anything that's bothering us, me, you, or anybody, we're giving it the power. It has no power on its own. And as soon as you can see it for what it is, you go backstage, and you look behind and you see where they make the scenery and the noise. You realize the show we're watching is on stage. Maybe we're sitting too many rows back, but if you go backstage and you see how they put it together, you get to see, hey, what we're seeing out front is just something different. You know, my son used to say that theater was suspending belief and telling a story. That's what it was. That's what theater is. That's what I guess he learned. And I thought, God, every alcoholic I know is in theater. You know, because that's what we did our whole life. We suspended belief and we told a story, you know. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But we told a story. I was married to a woman who couldn't be a more normal woman. And she would look at me sometimes, and she had a way of looking at me like, I thought, there's something terribly wrong with her. And there really wasn't. It was something terribly wrong with me. She was so normal. You know, she would say things like, there's somebody outside. And I'd say, good, that's where they belong, outside. You know, like, you know, when they come inside, shake me. Well, you know, because they don't belong inside, you know. And she'd have a way of looking at you like, or she'd wake you up and say, you know, I just had a terrible dream. What? I dreamt you took me to the desert and you left me there. Go back to sleep. And I promised to pick you up first thing in the morning. You know, like, I came home one day and I'm knocking down shots and she says, what's the matter? I said, the market just had its biggest downturn in the history of the market. She said, we don't own any stocks. You couldn't engage somebody like that. She was so perfectly in the moment. Her defense was just the truth. I had no place to go. So then I have to get angry. She used to look at me like, wow, you know. He's out there where the buses don't run, you know, like. And then she used to say, well, get it over. I'm going to go make dinner or something, you know, like. And she'd be walking away, and I'd still trying to think of something. And you know, in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been very lucky because through coming to a lot of meetings and hanging out with a lot of people and working with a lot of people and going on a lot of retreats, and I started this silent retreat thing several years back and got to go for a day, then 2 days, then 5 days, then a week, and then last year a month. The bottom line is that the Holy Grail for this millennium may very well be silence. When I come to meetings and we have to tell people to turn off stuff so that we can start an AA meeting, you know, you got to turn this off. We're very close to becoming a techno-barbaric world. You know, it's great stuff, and I know people need it for business. But when you can't be away from something for more than a few seconds, there's something terribly wrong with that. When you get on a plane and they got to tell people to turn that stuff off so we can take the plane off, and it's like it's any distraction rather than be in the moment. And guy said to me, "Do you have a computer?" I said, "No." "Do you like computers?" "No." He said, "How do you live without one?" I said, "Daily." You know. Now I'm not. You know, I know for business and stuff people need them, but it's like, you know, I'm at a point in my life where in order to salvage my life, I have to be very on guard all the time and very awake because I have a history of dozing. And when I doze, time goes by and things happen and I miss them. And I don't want to miss them. And I know that if you want to be in God's presence, you have to be conscious. You have to have a conscious contact. You know, it doesn't say that He's not there. It just says that you don't have an awareness of it. And I want to be conscious of His presence all the time, because I notice that when I am, my life runs real easy. You know, when my son was dying, we put him in the hospice, and he was in a coma. And we stopped all the medication because it wasn't doing anything. And 2 days before he died, he just came out of the coma as though he just woke up from a sleep, and he was perfectly awake. And he looked at me, and his mom was standing there and his brother, and he said, "Where am I? What's going on?" And I said, "You're in the hospice," which he knew right away what that meant. And he rolled his head to one side of the pillow. And I often heard that expression, being in the world but not of the world. And when he had a little tear in his eye, and then when he rolled his head back, he had a whole different look. And he had gone from being in the world to someone being of the world. And when he came back, he thanked his mom and I for being his parents, and how much he loved us, and that he was going to miss us, and that he hoped we were going to be okay. And then his mom kind of got a little teary-eyed and left the side of the bed, and he told me he thanked me for raising him, and how much he loved me, and he was hoping more than anything else that I would go on doing what I did with my life, and that I'd not let any of this interfere with anything. And that's when I realized that there was absolutely no power here. Absolutely none. Except that one that we talk about. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find Him now. I want to thank you guys for letting me come here. I really appreciate it. You've been very attentive, considering that you've been sitting such a long time. God love you. You're much better behaved than I am. I really appreciate everything that everybody did. I thank Keith, my brother, who I love, for filling in this morning for me. And people said he did a good job. I said, of course. You know, what else would he do but a good job? And the bottom line is, we got to take real good care of one another, because we're only on loan. And we don't know when the person that we have this resentment, anger, upsetment, whatever, is suddenly going to be out of our lives. And we don't want to miss the opportunity to tell people we love that we love them, because it can change all too quickly. There's a prayer that I read. It's a little mystical prayer. I don't know who wrote it. It was anonymous, but it goes like this. It says, "We cannot catch hold of it, nor can we let go of it. In not being able to get it, we get it. When we are speaking, it's silent. When we are silent, it speaks." God bless you.